Greetings and salutations, bootlickers. This is the Business of Is-ness, and today we're discussing Marxism. Today I want to discuss how the mechanistic teleology of Marx's historical materialism is problematic. Whew, I know, that's a mouthful, but I promise when this is all over, this will be clear and will make sense. But I want to make the claim that despite the incredible insights of historical materialism, that it is not immune to criticism. So, let's begin with some terminology. What do I mean by historical materialism? Historical materialism is a scientific approach to history. It is a product of Enlightenment thinking. It is a causal account of socio-historical and political development. According to historical materialism, it is the material conditions, aka the economic conditions, which determines a society's political, ideological, and cultural conditions. So what are some examples of this materialistic determinism? In the opening lines of the Communist Manifesto, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels state, "The history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggle." This points to that kind of materialistic determinism. So what are some other real-world examples of this? Christianity would be one, according to Marx. Christianity, according to Marx and this historical materialism, is a product of very abject material conditions. People suffered a lot. And so because of these very difficult material conditions, the people developed a faith and an ideology of Christianity where when they died, they would go to an afterlife where they would not suffer materialistically. So according to Marx, the ideology of Christianity, the faith of Christianity, was generated out of the material conditions of the time. Another example more pertinent to Marx would be capitalism. According to Marx, capitalism contains within itself the seeds of its own destruction. Because of things like exploitation and alienation, the working class or the proletariat would develop within itself a revolutionary consciousness. This revolutionary consciousness would generate a revolution and thus result in the dictatorship of the proletariat. Now, Marx thought that this dictatorship of the proletariat was inevitable with a kind of scientific certainty, and the same is true for the revolution. Now, what is meant by teleology, in a word, is consequentialism. It comes from the Greek word telos, which means goal, end, or purpose. So an example of the teleological model would be the utilitarian calculus. According to utilitarians, an action is ethical or good if it nets the most amount of pleasure for the most amount of people. Another more naturalistic example of the teleological model would be a tree seed. The purpose or goal, the telos, if you will, of a tree seed is to become a tree. All right, so that's what teleology is. It's consequentialism. Finally, what is meant by mechanistic? Basically, mechanistic just points to determinism, a kind of predetermination. Think of cogs in a machine that function with a kind of transitive process of causality. So if we look back to the example of capitalism, according to Marx, if you have capitalism, according to the mechanistic process, you will eventually have the dictatorship of the proletariat. So it's a predetermination. If capitalism is predetermined, that the dictatorship of the proletariat is inevitable. So what are the conclusions that we can derive from all this? Essentially, given the fact that the revolution has not happened and that the dictatorship of the proletariat has not yet occurred, we can assume that these things are not inevitable. We might start to realize that history cannot be reduced to a mechanistic model or to a teleological one. Reality, in the end, and history is far more multifaceted and ambiguous than any reductive model like historical materialism can account for. The process of history is so fraught with contingency that we can't reduce it to these scientific standards or these scientific models of mechanistic behavior. So in short, history is not predetermined. It has no goal. in the end, what we have to say in response to when Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels say that the history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggle, we must reply and say the history of all hitherto existing society is not merely the history of class struggle. We cannot reduce historical processes to a mechanistic determinism determined by economics. It's too reductive, and it fails to account for the rich and multifaceted experience of history. Anyway, let me know what you think about this. Please like and subscribe, comment below, and tell your friends, and maybe share this video. My name is Paul again. This is The Business of Business, and thanks for watching. Have a good day.